We talked today about the fact that deliverology in the UK and this kind of command and control management style destroys the purpose of organizations. Could you say a little bit about how that might apply to the CSU? I mean, we have a mission statement of access, affordability, some very important values that are part of our purpose.
Well, the only way to establish that would be to study it. I know we were talking earlier about how you've changed pricing, for example. So one of the things you ought to be doing is finding out what impact that's had on what I would call the nature of demand. In other words, students that turn up. Is it changing the type of students that turn up? Is it changing the volume? Is that change, a one-off, or has it been sustained? So these are things you would need to study to know, rather than just take a view that it's good or bad.
Another important point I thought you made was about the importance of getting, if you're going to try to improve things, and if that is your goal, to get knowledge about the system before you just take off and institute changes. Right. Could you give us some examples of the kinds of things you think might be investigated if we're trying to help students graduate more in a more timely fashion?
Yeah, I think the first priority is to find out why they don't graduate. It's like I was saying, we might be losing people before they even join us because of the way we set hurdles for them. We might be losing people in their early days of being with us because what we're offering doesn't suit their needs and whatever. We might be losing people for reasons outside of our control, but the important thing is to establish why we're losing people, and whether we're losing them in a fashion that's predictable. That gives you the basis for then further inquiry or experimentation with changing things to see whether you can improve graduation rates or indeed, more broadly, achievement of purpose.
You emphasized the importance of getting knowledge from everybody and the importance of control being, I think you called it at the operational level. Could you say a little bit more about?
Let's talk about getting knowledge first of all. I think it's really important that everybody involved is involved, not in asking for their view, but involved in studying the system. It's amazing how often you find people change their perception and indeed change their relationships, because they've cooperated in studying something together. So they develop a common view of it. And because it's a common knowledge-based view, they find it very easy to move on that and do something constructive about it. And you can't leave out the people at the top. It's understandable. The people at the top, they want things to improve, and they would take a view on what would good look like, and then they make the mistake of turning that into a series of targets and reining it down into an organisation. That's their mistake. An ambition to improve is not a bad thing, for anybody. Improvement is really a question of method, which is why I think it's very important that people should question, what's the evidence for deliverology? Because I think I reckon it's got terrible method, and therefore terrible method will have massive dysfunctional consequences, as we've seen in the UK, and we'll probably see in other places where they try it.
John, we have a management for whom control and command, or command and control, is thinking. So is there really any hope for being able to make a change when you've got that so entrenched in a management structure?
Well, of course. Why ever would you think they'd be anything other than command and control thinkers? That's how they've been schooled in management. To the extent that they have been schooled in management, that'll be the nature of the influences upon them. If they go out and seek advice from command and control thinkers, they'll get command and control advice. So, that's no surprise. I'll tell you, one of the things that interests me is that these ideas, systems ideas, have been around and demonstrating evidence for around 50 years now. And that just goes to show, what's the biggest barrier to the spread of these ideas? Current convention. There's nothing like, if you challenge convention, of course, people would normally simply reject you because it's hard to countenance things that are outside of your current frame of reference. But I wouldn't anticipate your leaders be anything other than command and control leaders. However, You also find out, generally, senior people are quite smart people. So when they get presented with ideas that are unconventional, quite a lot of smart people will say, well, this is worth exploring. Conventional command and control management just creates enormous costs, enormous waste.
That kind of brings us back to the beginning of the talk, which was about Michael Barber and deliverology. Because what we've heard about deliverology before we met you was that the thinking is that the faculty and anyone below management is an obstacle to change. And yet faculty are always reworking their curriculum. They're always thinking about change. They're thinking about how do you innovate these classes. So it seems like the faculty would be natural innovators, and to our way of thinking, the management is the stodgy ones. But they're saying we're the stodgy ones. It seems like we're at a standoff.
Right, but so what we've immediately done is set up a conflict.
Right.
You know. And you know, there's a whole literature about resistance to change, and the whole of that literature is based on the idea that it's them down there that are resistant. And in that sense, you know, you're right, systems thinking turns that on its head, because if the people at the top don't change their thinking, nothing can change.
We're hearing these administrators talk about the importance of getting rid of waste and, you know, getting a leaner system and a more efficient system. You specifically talked about it being a mistake to try to decrease labor costs, and that's certainly something that's been going on in our system. We've laid off thousands of faculty to deal with our problems, and they've in fact made things worse.
There are bigger costs, of course, you know, because if we dumb down our society, well, what are the ultimate costs of that? You know, what are the ultimate costs of having less able people to contribute to enterprise? What are other costs in terms of more social deprivation, crime? The biggest costs are the unknowable costs. And I think that's certainly true for adult care. It's probably true for education too.
We also have been in a certain amount of numbers and looking at cost. I mean, when you're in a conflict over budgets and management cutting things, everyone starts looking at, well, what does cost something? What's the fair cost?
Yeah,
What's the right thing? You know, and so I think both sides get into that mode, right? And one of the modes we've been in is looking at the growth of management itself. And we've looked at the last, say, 10 years, and we've seen that while the numbers of faculty have basically been flat, the number of students have gone way up, the number of managers has also gone way up. And we say, well, they're not in the classroom teaching.
Sure.
That's wrong. We shouldn't have that. There should be fewer managers. And are we getting stuck in that same kind of thinking, or is there something to that?
Again, one of my clients taught me a brilliant exercise. You know, if it's a private sector client, you know, when your business is going over the cliff, you ain't making any money, you've got to decide who to get rid of. And he called it the fire drill, okay? And he said, I said, how's it work? He said, well, I sit in my office and I ring the fire bell in my head, okay? And then I've got all of my organisation out in the car park. And I think, now who do I need back? And, you know, I've got to have the people who pick up the phones to the customers. I've got to have the people who fix their equipment. Now, what else do I need? If you design an organisation where the people who are doing the work, the way the health service in the UK ought to be designed, is where the clinicians are controlling and improving the work. You know, it does, when you put control into the work, it does change your view on what else you need, how much you need to manage it, how much you need to have external agencies telling people, you know, creating specifications, then expecting people to conform with those specifications when those specifications themselves aren't based on knowledge. So I'm a great fan of knowledge belonging in operations, because that's how you understand and improve systems.
So when you say operations, would the people who teach in the classroom be who we're talking about in our
Well,
case?
if you were doing the fire bell exercise and you decided, well, who do I need back? Because my purpose is to teach some students, I better have some teachers. I would have thought.
Right.